What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Behind Enemy Lines, a Texas A&M football podcast. I am your host, Tony Catalina from the Austin American-Statesman, and here to talk about Texas A&M football in their Week 7 matchup against the Florida Gators. Obviously, A&M is coming off a big-time win over Mississippi State when they won 31-9. A&M is rolling right now, 5-0 for the first time since 2016. Obviously, top 5 rating for the first time in both national polls since 2021. This is a good time for Texas A&M. They're playing some really good football right now, and what's scary about their opponents, or for their opponents, is they haven't done it in a perfect manner, right? It's either been the offense or it's been the defense, but very rarely has both come together and played some truly good football together. And to still have that in the tank is say, hey, like A&M has a chance to be a quality football team to put it all together. That is something that they still can achieve, and a level that they can reach is exciting if you're an A&M fan. So just kind of talking about that and looking at it in a holistic view for A&M. I mean, defensively, the last 2 weeks against Auburn and Mississippi State has been really impressive. I mean, their third down numbers only come leveling up like one third down and 24 attempts over the last 2 weeks. So it's been really fun on the defensive side of the ball. Head coach Mike Elko has taken a concerted effort to kind of revamp this defensive unit. He had talked about in leading up to, I believe it was Auburn and maybe a little bit before the Mississippi State game, that he looks at third down as an opportunity to see how creative he can get when it comes to rushing the passer. Can they do it with four guys? Can they get home with four or five guys? Is the thing he likes. Now he had talked about, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not fun to load the box and bring 8 people, and obviously anybody can get pressure in that manner, but how can they scheme up some pressure with it's 4 or 5 guys? And obviously, Cassius Howell on the edge, when you have talents like that, it makes things a lot easier. And, Howell obviously has 7 sacks so far this year, 8 tackles for loss. Both of those numbers lead the SEC. So, he's been super productive. This team is playing some really good football. And, now when you take moving forward and you look at that and say, now they got a Gators team who is 3-2. Record is not all that great, but coming off an inspired win against the Texas Longhorns, and did so in a pretty impressive fashion. Texas didn't look all that good offensively. Arch Manning threw 2 interceptions, and the Gators are kind of on them from the early jump. And obviously, Texas doesn't look like this juggernaut that a lot of teams or a lot of people thought they were going to be. So those are one of the things that you take with a grain of salt here. But as A&M gets ready to host the Florida Gators, another night game in Kyle Field, 6 p.m. kick on ESPN. This is going to be a game where I think it's another test for A&M, but I think a test that they can't pass. There are a lot of things to be excited about if you're A&M, and the first one I'm going to talk about is, Florida's offense really just hasn't been that good this year. I mean, under DJ Lagway, a lot of people thought he was a Heisman Trophy finalist, somebody that was going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the country, and it just really hasn't. It just hasn't worked out that way for him. So, looking at the numbers, entering Week 7, the Gators are last in the SEC in scoring. Excuse me, in the SEC in scoring offense with 23.4 points per game. The 13th in total offense with 354 yards, and rushing, they're 130.2 yards, which is also 13th in the conference. And passing is slightly better. They're 12th in the conference with 223.8 passing yards per game. So, DJ Lagway's thrown 7 touchdowns. He's thrown 7 interceptions. He's only thrown the ball 196 yards per game. So there are some things when you look at this team and say, what's the issues? They do have two quality offensive linemen, Austin Barber and Jake Slaughter, the center and off interior guy there. They have protection up front, you would think. So what is the issue? How can they not make it work? So something that A&M is going to have to scheme up. They've been really strong in the secondary. I think Des Ricks but he's night and day compared to where he was last year to this year. Will Lee had talked about last week how he's kind of rounding into form from where he was earlier in the season. He's got his confidence. He's playing better football, and I think that's showing up. A&M is playing high level secondary. Obviously, the linebackers is it's been really intriguing because Torian York is playing sideline to sideline as good as anybody in the country. They're banged up with Scooby Williams, who has been day to day, and then ultimately didn't play the last 2 weeks, dealing with an injury he suffered against Notre Dame. But in his place has been Damian Sanford, who has been outstanding. Damian Sanford has been, I think he had 7 tackles last on Saturday. He had an interception, he had a sack. He's just been making plays, and he's been a really good addition to this group in absence of a Scooby Williams who was playing good football as well. I think when Scooby gets back, whether it be this week or following or whenever that happens, I think they have a really good mix in linebacker where they could sit here and say, Scooby may be the early down guy. Sanford comes in, he's the blitzing guy. Maybe he can cover. He can cover well too. So they feel good about their second level. And then at the defensive line, like I mentioned, with Howell leads the conference in sacks, leads the conference in tackles for loss. Dayon Hayes is making plays. TJ Searcy's making plays. Rylan Kennedy. These guys, they have pass rushers, and what makes them so good is what we talked about. Mike Elko. They get creative. The stunts, the twists, the TEs, the ETs, like how they attack the offensive line and put pressure on them is super impressive. So obviously, this is a defense going against an offensive unit that has struggled most of the year, right? They're 3-2. They're one of the bottom offensive teams in the conference, and A&M's got to find a way to exploit that. So with that being said, like, the chances are going to be there. A&M's going to have to weather an early storm. I think that's kind of what I've seen from this team is, teams come out, they play inspired football. Look at the way Mississippi State was early. They had that drive where it was like 17 plays and it ended up with a field goal. So it was a bend but don't break, but a little up tempo, a little change of pace. They find it early, and then A&M has had to settle down, sent in the first 2 games of SEC play. So look for the defense to try to win this advantageous matchup against the Gators offense. Now, where I would say the Gators have a distinct advantage over A&M is in the discipline category as far as penalties go. Right now, A&M is one of the most penalized teams in the country, in the conference. They're 14th in the SEC with penalties. I think it's 47 at this point. And Florida is honestly in the complete opposite of that. The Gators entering week 7 ranked 4th in the SEC for penalties. They've only had 28 flags in 5 games. Say what you want about Billy Napier. Obviously, his record with the Gators has not been impressive. He's 21-22 as a head coach, but this team has played clean football. So ultimately, which makes their start a little perplexing, right? Because you think about the Florida Gators, you would think they have the talent to compete with anybody, right? It's Florida. They're competing in the recruiting trail with everybody. They're winning recruiting battles. They get talent in. And, for them to not just produce on the field is pretty perplexing, especially when you add the fact that they're not, hurting themselves in the penalty area. They're not having, bad penalties. They're finding ways to play clean football and still losing football games. So, interestingly enough, if A&M is going to continue to hurt themselves and put themselves behind the chains when it comes to penalties, this is a football team you're not going to be able to say, hey, like, come and bail us out in that sense. So A&M's got to play clean football. They got to be able to go out there and find a way to not hurt themselves. Because I do think when you look at a lot of these matchups, Florida has talent. It's obvious. Like, the talent is there. It's just the questions of why hasn't it been put together. And that's why people question Billy Napier and his tenure there. But with that being said, A&M has talent at every level, at every spot, in every spot. So it's one of those things where can they find a way to stay disciplined because they're going against the team that has proven that they can be disciplined. So find a way to just continue to attack that and find a way there. Ultimately, when you look at this matchup, though, historically speaking, these are 2 teams that have played each other really tough. Like they've played 7 times in their history. A&M, is it has the lead right now since they joined the conference. They're 3-2 in the conference, with the latest win coming in last year in Marcel Reed's first start as the quarterback for Texas A&M. Obviously, a lot has changed since that moment. A lot of talent changes, a lot of hands, changing over, and there are some things there that you feel good about the matchup, right? You feel good about the talent. You feel good about the way A&M is playing. Mario Craver, KC Concepcion, the running game, Le'Veon Moss, Ruben Owens, this offensive line. A&M right now, obviously a top 5 team, is playing like a top 5 team, but like I mentioned earlier, the skill, the ability to play even better is still there and untapped. If A&M can limit the penalties, if they're able to have their A game on offense and the A game on defense, what does that look like and how scary can that be for the rest of the country and the rest of the conference? So look for the Florida Gators to come in. I expect them to play some inspired football. They already beat Texas. They're probably feeling good about themselves. Um, but can A&M weather that? Can A&M kind of put them back in their place, so to speak? I mean, this is a 3-2 football team who, all in purposes, one more loss will pretty much button it up any playoff hopes that they may have, right? Sitting here at 3-2, it's already a long shot. They gotta go and kind of win out and find a way to do that. But one more loss kind of puts the Gators, beyond reach at that point. So can A&M do that? It's obviously a Gators team that still has talent, and I understand that fans get nervous and expectations for A&M are really high right now, and a lot of national love. Like I mean, you know me, a local guy here. I've been covering them, every day, so I see the attention. The attention never stopped coming from this side of it. We've always known that this team has talent and they had an ability, but now the national guys, ESPN, Fox, CBS, all these guys are looking at this team and they're saying, "Hey, this is a really talented squad. This is a team that should be paying attention to." And with that comes nerves. I understand that. So looking at that, looking at some of the matchups here, A&M is a team that has to find a way to weather the storm. And I think Mike Elko had a really insightful comment a couple weeks ago. I asked him about coming out of the bye week, and I said, do you prefer to come out of the bye week or like after a big win against Notre Dame, or do you just wish you could just keep playing, just keep the momentum going? And I'm paraphrasing, but he pretty much said, uh, at some point in time, this team's going to learn how to win football games, right? It doesn't matter if it's a bye week, if it doesn't matter if it's you're going to play 10 straight games. Like you got to find a way to continuously win football games. And I think A&M through the first month and some change of the year has proven that they know how to do that, right? Like it's been night and day different in each game almost. This team early on was like offensive juggernaut. We're going to score 40 points a game and we're going to run teams out of the building. And then they had to go and play against an Auburn team that offense wasn't clicking and they still had to find a way and the defense had to be tough. And then kind of the same thing early on against Mississippi State before the dam broke in the second half, scoring 17 fourth quarter points, but 31-9 isn't really indicative of what that game really was. Like I feel like that game felt more of like a 13-3, 17-3 game more than the 31-9 score it ended up being. So my point being, A&M has found multiple ways and proven that they're a team that can win in multiple ways, but can they find a way to put it all together? And would this not be the most advantageous week to do that? Like DJ Lagway, that kid still has all the talent to be the quarterback that everybody in the country thought he could be. Don't let him put it all together against you in this week, right? Don't let him be what he can be this week. I think that's the challenge for Mike Elko. That's the challenge for Jay Bateman in the secondary. Don't let him go out there and be the talent that everyone expected him to be. There's been some transgressions. There's been some up and down play. Continue that for him. Find a way to make things tough for him. Bring some pressure. Find a way to get around his space in the pocket. Make things uncomfortable. And I think A&M's going to walk out of Kyle Field with their sixth win of the season. But there is, like I said, talent that can creep up on you here. This isn't a talent deprived Florida Gators team. This is a team that can play. So understanding that, taking that with a grain of salt and all of that, the A&M has their hands full. And I think we had talked about this SEC teams. You're going to have your hands full every single week. I never understood why last week A&M was a 16.5 point dog, and everybody wanted to talk about A&M as a big upset pick, big upset pick. Everyone was picking, Mississippi State as a chance to go and shock the world. Every week it feels like that's the case with A&M. Everybody likes to say they're the trendy upset pick. Everybody likes to talk about how they can be picked off and that it's not real. A&M has to continue to prove to naysayers that it is real, right? We're a real team. This team is capable of beating anybody. They're capable of winning every week, despite what national pundits, people like myself say. It doesn't matter, right? Go out there, block out the noise, and play football. So this would just be another case of that. It's their last home game of a 3-game home stretch before they hit the road and play some tough matchups. So obviously Arkansas they're in dire straits right now. Things are dicey in Arkansas, but Bobby Petrino element is interesting. Going to Fayetteville is interesting, and then obviously you get Death Valley a bye week, and then Missouri, who's playing good football as well. So, not getting too far ahead of them. They got this Florida one. They got to find a way to figure this one out. Defend home field, defend home turf. There are a lot of things, a lot of matchups that are intriguing. I'm going to talk about it throughout the week, and we'll dissect it all. But with that being said, A&M 5-0, first time since 2016, first time being a nationally consensus top five ranked team since 2021. The vibes are good right now, and the only way to continue that is to find a way to go and beat a Florida Gators team that's going to come in hungry. They're going to come in motivated, and they knocked off your biggest rival last week. So there's no way in their mind that they don't feel like they can and shouldn't do that. So you got to find a way to stop that, and we'll see how it shakes out. But we'll have a more about that to talk about here at the Austin American-Statesman. So again, I'm Tony Catalina, the Texas A&M football beat reporter for the Austin American-Statesman. Appreciate you guys taking the time for another episode of Behind Enemy Lines, a Texas A&M football podcast. Catch you guys next week. Peace.